Hey there, Facebook friends and family. It's Patricia Hayes here with the 15-minute advocate. So glad to be back on board and back in the swing of things. Last time we started talking about how can you have, what do you need to do when it's time to do a presentation or to prepare some remarks or something like that, and you're completely uncomfortable and you don't know where to start. And you're scared to death. Where do you start? And we talked about how the best way to start is to think about having a conversation regarding the topic that you're going to speak on, to explore with people, having conversations, to ask questions, to be the receiver of questions, to give information and to receive information, and then be willing to leave a little space for things to be open so that you can accept things as they come to you later on, maybe not right then in the moment. So along those lines, we're going to continue today and talking about how to get a good start. Where do you start? What is an introduction? Like, how do you know where to start when you're actually getting going? And this can be really tricky for some people because, depending on amount of time, what the subject matter is, who the audience is, there's so many variations, so many factors to take into account. So this is really going to keep it pretty simple because some of those things, are things that I get into details when I'm working with someone one-on-one, and we'll customize, what the introduction looks like based on the topic, the subject matter, the audience, and all of that. But here's the really keep it simple piece of that it can work, regardless of who it is you're talking to, what it is you're focused on, and when is it occurring. The best way to start an introduction a lot of times is with a story. Now, the obvious, people will most likely say, well, it should be introducing yourself, right? I mean, that's hello, an introduction. I'm not talking about saying, hey, my name is, this is what I do, this is why I'm here, here's my theme, okay? Because a lot of times that has already been done for you by either in writing, by a notice if this is a workshop or something that's been publicized. Even if you're going in to meet with someone one-on-one, they know something about you. So, you can do the perfunctory, hi, I'm so glad to meet you. Again, my name's Patricia. I'm here to talk to you about X issue. That's great. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when it's time for you to really get started on what it is you are here to talk about, what it is you're there to present on, what it is you're there to be an advocate for. And so many times people can get caught up in that. I know I've done it. I mean, sometimes doing the introduction can be really tough. And I'll, lay out the centers and then come back and wait to be inspired for the introduction and or the conclusion. But a lot of times people make it harder than it needs, trying to be fancy, trying to be cute, and it doesn't come across as being authentic. And that's what you really want, is when you're doing creating an introduction or you're preparing for one, the most important thing, regardless of your audience, is to know that you want to come across as being authentic. You want them to engage with you. You want them to be prepared to listen to you a little bit longer. And to keep following you as you make it your way through your ideas, through the conversation, through the presentation that you're about to have. And a way to maintain your authenticity and to engage at that level is, quite frankly, to tell a story. Now, what makes it sometimes easier, sometimes a little harder, because when it's your own story, it's sometimes hard to edit. But if the story is your own, that is a great place to start. So now if you are, going to meet with some public officials to talk about some policy issue, a lot of times this is a great place to start and to tell a short story about how your child has been impacted by the issue, about, how you got to this point. I've used that tactic many a time, and it also helps to tie things up and wrap things up on the back end when you're doing a conclusion, which we'll talk about later. But the story, using one of your own, is a great way to start. I mean, I know when I did a presentation a couple of months back, I was really fretting over it because while I had expertise in the subject matter generally, I didn't have expertise in the subject matter specifically. And so I was torn as to how to approach the presentation that I was making, because I can't pull wool over these people's eyes. They're the experts in this particular area, right? But I knew that I couldn't get caught up in not having that expertise. They chose me to come speak to them, so they knew that when they asked me to come present. So what I did instead, though, was I realized from after sitting with it for a while, was like, you know what? The best story, the best introduction to this is a personal one, which can be risky in a professional setting, right? But it's in how you do it and how you present it. And what I did was I used the story of my daughter's own history with this issue and my history with that issue and how that flowed into what I was talking about, and then was able to tie it up at the end. So sometimes we don't have to look as hard and as far as we think in order to find a great way to start a story, to start a presentation, or to initiate a conversation you may be having about, some policy matter or issue or something like that. Here's the other thing, is sometimes you may not have a story. You may not have a story personally that relates to what's going on. This is when you can adopt someone else's story. And when I say adopt, I mean utilize someone else's story, not put the story on as if it's your own, because that's dishonest. However, but you can take a story from someone that you know, of course, leaving out any personally identifying matters or things like that, or stories that you've read about, even fictionalized ones where the topic or the subject matter or whatever it is, really ties into it. And that makes it, makes it interesting. And it means you have really invested some time in figuring out what works best for what it is you're talking about. So an introduction is really, really important because it's your first foray into getting the person, getting the audience, getting the group to buy into what it is you want to say, what it is you want to talk about. And that's not so to put so much pressure on you, but to help you know that you should give it the respect and the honor that it deserves by being very thoughtful about what it is you say, how you're going to present it, and ultimately, where do you want that to lead? Because that is something that I see a lot of times too, as you get through it, is people start off with this introduction, particularly if it's something that was really grabbing and it's really pulled your audience in, and then you left them hanging and you didn't tie it up at the end or pull it through out your presentation. We'll talk more about that later. But just remember that when you are preparing to use a story as an introduction, that the important thing is, hey, is this something that I can reference throughout my presentation? Is it something that I can tie back in? Is it something that I can tie back in, or do I need to? Because how you utilize a story, that will make a difference. Now, sometimes you may not have a story. What if the introduction doesn't lend itself, or the topic doesn't lend itself to using a story as your introduction? Then sometimes it may be building a story around the facts of the situation, the facts that are involved, whether it's a policy conversation or if you're talking about business, right? Okay, so maybe you need to build a story. So what have we talked about? With introduction, with these stories, you have all of these options. You can use a personal story. You can use someone else's story, whether it's another live person or whether it's one that's fictional or something like that. Basically, something that's been previously created. Or thirdly, you can come and you can build a story. And that's the difference between creating one that's fictionalized, right, and building one. Because sometimes when you're building one, that means you're using facts or situations to create a storyline, to create a point that you're going to be carrying through throughout your presentation. Now that gets a little more sophisticated, right? So that may not be someplace you want to start, unless of course you're an expert in the area in which you're going to be speaking on. If you're an expert in the area in which you're going to be speaking on, you should absolutely consider building your story from utilizing your expertise. Whether it's the facts of the situation, whether it's acknowledging the types of people that are drawn to a certain situation, or the story, or the policy, whatever it may be. So that is something that you definitely can do, that I highly encourage people to do. But the point here really is to make sure that you are prepared to give and to provide a strong introduction when you're making your remarks, when you're giving your statements of the case as it may be. Someone might say, well, how do you do that? If you only have 5 minutes to go talk to a representative about an issue, I don't have time to do that. Sure you do. You just do it in a much more concise area, an amount of time. So it could be very well be, hey, thank you so much, Senator so-and-so. I'm pleased to be here to speak with you today about these issues regarding education. And I feel so strongly about them because my child has been impacted specifically by this issue for many years, okay? And I want to share with you a couple of points as to why it's important for us to take action in this particular way moving forward. Do you see what I just did? So I introduced, I acknowledged, greetings, because a lot of times people presume introductions for greetings. So I greeted, but then I also said, hey, here's the issue, why I care about it, and really, really quickly tied in the fact that I have a personal story that plays into this, okay? So it does not matter how brief or how quick the presentation or the advocacy session or whatever it may be is, you can still follow these rules, okay? So I think we're almost out of time, but that's what I really wanted to stress with you today. As you're preparing for whatever the next presentation is that you have, whether it's for work or whether it's in the community, think about the story that you can tell to help you to build out a presentation that will be well received, that will be remembered positively, and that will be impactful into the future, okay? And those stories can be personal, they can be adopted from someone else or from fiction or something like that, or you can build your own utilizing your expertise as the base. Really, really I hate to say simple, but it's not. But the concepts are, and it'll help hopefully to feed your mind on other ways on how to get ready or how to prepare when it's time for you to make a presentation of any kind. All right? Okay, I like to keep it to the 15 minutes in the 15-minute advocate, and our time is just about up. Next time, we're going to get into talking about how to develop the body of your presentation. What do you use? How do you keep that stuff all contained and make it still relevant and impactful at the same time? I look forward to it. As always, you can check things out and put comments in below from this page, or you can check things out if you're checking it out on the website at patriciavhayes.com. If you or someone you know needs help specifically with some presentation work or developing some skills when it comes to speaking, reach out to me. I love doing that stuff, and it's something I've been doing for quite some time now, and would love to have the opportunity to talk about what that might look like for you. All right, have a great week and see you next time.